God's on the move in the city of Austin. God's moving here, and it is exciting to be a part of what God's doing, and what I would say is the coolest city on the earth. And I've been challenged a little bit. I get so excited about what God has for us today, and we'll get into it. But I've just been burdened a little bit just to take a little bit of time week in and week out to help us all remember why we are here. Because we can come on Sunday and we experience great worship, and we can be with our friends and have a great time. But in all of that, we can very quickly lose sight that we're not here just simply to gather on a Sunday morning. Not simply to hear a sermon, to sing some songs. We're here to see the city of Austin completely changed. And when I say that, I'm not saying it tongue-in-cheek. Like, I legitimately believe in the power of the local church. Do you? I legit believe that the church being the church is actually the solution to the problems that are unsolvable in culture. I genuinely believe that everything that's facing our city, that the church being the church is the answer to that problem. God has put you in specific places, in companies, in industries, in different areas of the city to see His kingdom move there. To see His glory expand in that place. And our heart here is that we would see Jesus impact and affect every area of society. That there would be no one and no thing left behind as the glory of God swells in us, that the glory of God would swell through us. We're a river here at Antioch. We like to say that we're a church in the city for the city. That we want to be in the middle of what's happening so that we can see God's hand at work as the church steps in to the chaos at times that is our city. And we don't just have a heart for our neighborhoods. We have a heart for the nations. And do you know that over the past, thank you, I appreciate that one person that fired up about the nation. Do you know over the past 6 years, we have sent out 6 either new church plants or new works all over the world? Our church. Our church. We are a church planting church. We plant churches. We don't just do that overseas. We want to do it in America. We want to see the city of Austin populated with Antioch churches. Why not? Because we're never going to be able to reach our city from one place. We're going to have to expand as our city expands. And it's just important as we're leaning into this new season. We're loving, we're growing. A lot of rad things are happening. We're so thankful for what's going on. And I've just been like, hey, let's not forget that we're not just gathering. We're here to be an apostolic people on a mission. And that's just a churchy way of saying that we actually believe that the Bible is true. That the people of God are to go into all of the nations and preach the gospel of Jesus and see people's lives transformed by Him. At the heartbeat of who we are here at Antioch is that we want the gospel to come alive in you so that the gospel can move through you. Our vision is only as big as you jumping in and dreaming with us. It takes all of us saying, God, would you do something extraordinary here? As we link arms with people all across the city that are dreaming for the same thing. And it's beautiful to see these buds of harvest that are happening in our city. And I just want to say that we haven't seen anything yet. Amen? We haven't seen anything yet. All right, well, today we're in week 2 of our new series of talks that we're calling Fresh Start. Anybody in the house wish that life had a redo button? Anybody? Like you said something, you're like, man, I wish I could just push a button. You don't remember that I said that, right? Like things that you wish you wouldn't have said, things you wish you wouldn't have done. I mean, how great would that be, if you had a redo button on life where you just like, whoops, and you just can go to that one space, hit it, the whole world rewinds 15 minutes, and you're like, okay, cool, no harm, no foul. We all have things that we wish we wouldn't have done in our lives. We all have some sort of regret, some sort of and depending on if you're like me or not, you might have a lot more of those than the person sitting next to you. And if you don't have any regret, the person sitting next to you will remind you of things you should regret. But yeah, I mean, the crazy thing about life is we can't go back. There is no redo, but there is transformation. We are made new. There's no redo button, but through the gospel of Jesus, there is a we are made new. And Dallas Willard, who I love, and you'll hear this quote a lot through this series of talks, says that our whole goal in life is to live the life of the kingdom of heaven into every corner of the human existence. That every part of us has been impacted and transformed, made completely new because of our relationship with Him. Romans 12, the first two verses, kind of our anchor passages for this series. It says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Don't conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed." Somebody say transformed. "But be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will." Last week we started talking about the difference between being a believer in Jesus and a disciple of Jesus. To be a disciple of Jesus does not mean that you prayed a prayer at some point at some camp, and then every once in a while, in a time of need, you throw up a random prayer request. When things get really bad, you show up at church, and you just live life as if you never met the King. That's not being a disciple. You'd be like, well, I believe in Jesus, but you can believe in Jesus and not be a disciple. We said last week that every disciple is a believer, but not every believer is a disciple. That we're called to walk in the dust. We're called to be those who sit so close to our apprentice, Jesus, that everything He says and does impacts our lives. To be transformed, to be made new, that there's not an area of our life, how we speak, how we think, what we hope for, what we hope in. Every part of our lives is to be impacted by who Jesus is. We're students, we're apprentices of Him. And today we want to take another step towards what it means to be a disciple and lean into another area of our lives that is affected when we walk with God and not simply just believe that there is a God, and it is our reflection. Our reflection. There's stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves that are not true. I'll say that again. There are stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves that are not true. And at times, those stories that are not true don't line up at all with the story that God is telling in your life. There are things about us that become all that we can see. There's things about us that when we look in the mirror, they consume what we see. I'm willing to bet you all the money in my pocket, and I'm a pastor, so you know it's a lot. that those things that pop into your head when you're looking in a mirror are not positive. When you look in the mirror, if you're like me, all I can see is the things I don't like. Like, I don't like this belly that's popping out. I don't like that. This is new. I'm adjusting to it. Okay, I don't like it. It's all I see. Right? I don't like that I don't have any hair. Right? You look in the mirror, I'm like, dang, I can't change my hairstyle. I don't like that. I don't like that mole on my neck. That bothers me. I don't like how I have to check the tops of my ears now for whisker-like hairs. Why is that I can't grow hair on the top of my head, but my ears have the ability to produce? I mean, it's like that hair was not there yesterday, and now it's like 4 feet. I could braid it. And I'm like, can we transfer some of... Right? And like, so when you look in the mirror, like that you're drawn to the things you don't like about yourself. Is this not true for you? That you don't look at the mirror and be like, dude, I got great calves, man. Like, that's not what happens. You look in the mirror and your eyes immediately go to the negative storyline that you're telling yourself about how you look. And the thing is if we look in the mirror long enough, it's not just that we start to see the things we don't like about ourselves physically. You'll start to see the things you don't like about yourself internally. It's like, man, I don't like that I'm so insecure. It's like, I'm 42 years old. Why in the world am I still dealing with insecurity? I don't like that about myself. I don't like that I still care about what people think about me. That bothers me. Because I'm like, that shouldn't be an issue, right? Like, haven't I matured? Haven't I grown? Haven't I seen healing? God's literally transformed me. Why is it then that I still have these moments that just echo in my head, reminding me of how broken I am? I don't like I deal with anxiety. I don't like that I get overly frustrated. The longer we look at ourselves, for most of us, the harder it becomes to see anything but the things we wish were different about ourselves. And I'm sure you've all seen videos of parents being interviewed about how they feel like they're doing as a parent. And without fail, everybody says, well, I'm not patient enough. I'm not present enough. I'm not nurturing enough. And then they interview their kids. Like, hey, how's mom doing? How's dad doing? And the responses of the kids are so different than the stories that the parents told. You wonder, are these actually the kids of these parents? It's so different. It's not like a little bit different. It's drastically different because we obsess in our reflection in the mirror about the things that are broken about us. So it doesn't matter how you see me, I'm going to think you see me the way that I see me. When Sophie was in kindergarten, those were the days, right? Your kids liked going to school. You could help them with their homework. First grade, I was done. It's like, can you help me with math? I'm like, no help from this guy. And And kindergarten's awesome. You know, kindergarten is just filled with random little projects. It's like one project to the next project to the next project. So they were doing that in their little class. And so Sophie comes home and she's telling us about this project they're doing, about writing about someone who's the most important person in your life. And so, we're sitting at the table and Sophie's in her little, 5-year-old broken language is telling us, yeah, I'm so excited about this. And then she starts going on this like encouragement trail, and you're like, are we being filmed right now? Like this is one of those moments where you're like, no way, this is actually happening. She was like, yeah, I was just thinking about who is the most important person to me, like who is always there to love me, who's always there to help me. And Liz and I are just sitting there like, oh man. And she goes, so I'm doing this project about Miss Blair, who is our best friend. And you're like, really? Well, where was Miss Blair last night? You know what I'm saying? And you in those moments, right? Like you chuckle, you're like, oh, kids, but at the same time, you're like, do you see me? Like, do you see what I'm doing for you? That you would literally be dead without me sitting in your own poop? Miss Blair? Right? Like, do you see me at all? But here's the deal. The question under that do you see me question is, am I doing okay? Am I doing okay? Am I any good at this parenting thing? Am I like, is there any value that I'm actually providing? Am I good at what I do? Am I good at my job? Am I a good student? Am I a good parent? The how I'm doing question can be haunting. It can be so haunting. But what's amazing about the how am I doing question is it has little to do with how you're actually doing. My team has a joke that it's rare for me to start any conversation without saying one of two things. Have I told you this story, or have you seen this documentary? Those are my two intro points, and it's because I'm a preacher, God allows my life to be absolutely ridiculous so that I have things to say, which in the moment I'm not thankful for, but then when I'm writing sermons, I'm like, thanks, God, that my car blew up and my shoes caught on fire. That's going to be helpful. Right now it's scary, but this is going to be a great story, and I need a lot of them because I talk every week. And but the other thing is that I love documentaries. I love them so much, and I can't get enough of them. I love reading books that are biographies. I just love getting into people's lives. And I'll never forget, I'm watching a documentary on John Mayer. You guys know John Mayer, the musician, right? Now think, whoa, got a fan in the house. Okay. All right, Timothy Nordyke. All right, know what I'm getting you for Christmas, brother. Not going to youth camp this year, but does like... No, I'm joking, bro. John Mayer will be there. So think what you may about John Mayer. I don't know him personally. None of that matters for this illustration because I am watching this documentary, and they literally are filming him coming off stage from performing for like 2 hours in front of 50,000 people who all paid hundreds of dollars to watch him do what he does. So you would think that at that moment, as he's walking off of this stage from a screaming 50,000 person stadium, that he would not be asking the question, am I any good at what I do? But it was heartbreaking and fascinating to hear him loop. Was that okay? No, like really. Like he would go to person, like really, tell me, was that okay? Did I do okay? Do you think that was a good performance? Like, And you're watching it and you're like, dude, you're John Mayer. Like you are incredible. No one is going to pay to come watch me play guitar. Like you are at the top of your game. Yet the question, no matter your success, no matter how much money you have in the bank, no matter how popular you become, the question of, am I doing okay, is not answered in those things. It is answered right here. It's answered right here in the story you hear when you see your reflection. There's a guy in the Bible named Gideon. How many of you have heard of Gideon? Gideon is an incredible guy. And I relate to Gideon because Gideon had an issue with his reflection. Because God saw one thing in Gideon, but Gideon saw another. And if you're unfamiliar, Gideon, at the time that he was walking the earth, everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. The enemies of the people of God absolutely had taken over everything and anything. And it wasn't that God turned their back on them, it was that they turned their back on God. And how many of you know that you can't sow into foolishness and not reap foolishness? It goes together. And so the people of God had sowed into foolishness. They had started worshiping other gods, not worshiping the one true God. And because of their sin, they turned away from God. And in that, the consequences of living a life outside the covering of God was in full force. And so they were completely overrun. They were desperate. The Amalekites and the Midianites, it said, were so pervasive that as soon as it was time for the Israelites to harvest the food that they had spent growing all year, that it says in Judges 6 that it looked like a swarm of locusts would come over the fields, and it was just the enemies of the people of God coming and stealing the food from the people of God. And they were desperate. They were desperate. And finally, in their desperation, they called out to God. They cried out to God. How many of you are thankful that even when you find yourself in a mess that you created, that you can call out to God and He will rescue you? It doesn't matter what you did or how you got there. When you call out to Him, He is faithful to rescue you. And this is exactly what happened. The people in their desperation, they called out, God, you have to help us. You have to do something. And so then in Judges 6:11, God comes to Gideon. And it says, the angel of the Lord came and sat down under an oak of Ophrah and belonged to Joash, who was an Azarite, where his son Gideon, here we go, check this out, was threshing wheat in a wine press to keep it from the Midianites. Okay? What he's doing is he's hiding. He is hiding the food that he's been able to gather. He's hiding it so that it won't get stolen. He doesn't want to fight for it. He's hiding from the enemy. And it says this, verse 12, when the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, and he said, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. The one who is hiding in a wine press, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. Gideon says, pardon me? Right? Why did he say that? Because when Gideon looked in the mirror, he didn't see a mighty warrior. So he heard, mighty warrior. And he's like, excusez-moi? Pardon me? Is someone else in the wine press right now? Threshing this wheat? Pardon me, Lord, Gideon replied. Now listen to this. But if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all His wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian. I love Gideon's emotional honesty right here. This is not what this sermon is about, but it's a good thing to note about a healthy life with God. As Gideon is emotionally honest with his frustration about the circumstance that he is in. I don't know about you, but I totally have moments when someone wants to come up to me when I'm going through a hard time and pray for me, and you're like, I don't know, I'm good. Is that you? Like anybody else, like where you're struggling, you're going through a really hard time, and like, hey, let's just pray for you, and you're like, I don't know. I'd rather not, because I know what you're going to say, but I know what I'm experiencing, and the disconnect is too painful to relive right now. Gideon is frustrated, and you read through the Psalms and you see that Gideon's not alone, right? They're called Psalms of Lament. It's when people are vulnerable with what is happening in their lives and how desperate they are for God to intervene in their lives. But a healthy lament is different than a rant. A healthy lament has two things. It has emotional honesty, and it has God's character in clarity. Healthy laments have both. It's emotionally honesty about what's hard, but the clarity of who God is, regardless of what I'm experiencing. That's what a lament is. Gideon was not lamenting. Gideon was ranting. He was like, where are you? What are you doing? Like, what do you mean that you are with me? You're not with us. You haven't been with us. But even in Gideon's rant, it says in verse 14, the Lord turned to him and said, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? Again, pardon me? Excuse me? Gideon replied, how can I save Israel? Watch this. We're about to hear his story. So we've heard God's version of who Gideon is. Now we're getting ready to hear Gideon's version of who Gideon is. And you'll understand why he kept having trouble hearing, you are a mighty warrior. And he says, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest. My clan is the weakest. Gets better. And I'm the least in my family. So my family is the weakest, and I'm the weakest of the weakest family. So when Gideon looks in his reflection, the story that he has heard for his whole life and that he has told himself for as long as he could think is we are the weakest family. And Gideon, guess what? You're the weakest of all of us. So when God looks at him and says, you're a mighty warrior, he's like, no, I'm not. Because the story he's telling himself when he looks at the reflection of himself is not the story of who God says that he is. It's the story of what he has learned that he is. He didn't see a mighty warrior, so there was no way he could receive what God was saying. You know, oftentimes as a pastor, I hear this all the time. Pastor, I'm having trouble hearing the voice of God. And I got to be honest with you, when I then start to talk to people, I'm like, well, hey, have you quieted your heart? Have you just sat there and said, God, would you speak to me? And just write down what you feel like he's saying. And then you just read over it. And anything that's not biblical, you just throw it away. Just like learn to hear him. And almost every time to the exact minute after I say that, they're like, yeah, but every time I do that, all I hear is that he loves me. That can't be him. How many of you have thought that? God, speak to me. Hey, I love you. I'm proud of you. And you're like, dang it. Like, no, I'm trying to hear, Lord, speak to me. I'm proud of you. Stop, mind. Like, I think we say we have trouble hearing God because we have trouble receiving We have trouble receiving what God is saying to us. You know, Gideon gets a bad rap a lot of times from preachers and like, man, this dude had no faith, man. Because after God like met him over and over and over and over and over again, then Gideon actually takes a step in the right direction. We see a little bit of obedience. God's like, hey, I want you to tear down this idol. He goes and does it, but he does it at night. Right? A little half obedience, right? Like, I'll take care of it, but in the dark. God's with me, mighty warrior, when no one's watching, you know? And so he does that like he's faithful, and you're like, way to go, Gideon. And then this wild thing happens. The town wants to kill him, but his dad says, no, let Baal defend himself. And so then in that one statement, the town goes from being against Gideon to for Gideon, and that alone, you'd be like, whoa, God really is with you, dude. Yeah. No. Gideon's like, one more thing. So I've got this fleece deal. I'm going to put it in the wine press, and if it could be soaking wet, but everything else could be dry, that'd be really cool. Then the next morning he wakes up, everything's dry. He picks up the fleece, it's soaking wet. He wrings it out, fills up a bowl filled with water, and you're like, yes, dude, God is with you. Nope. Gideon's like, one more thing. Can we do the reverse? Can you make everything else wet but the fleece dry? And you read that and you're like, Gideon, come on, dude, like get with the program. Like God is like answering your prayers. He's showing up. But then I saw it from a different perspective. And I'm realizing, you know why God was so gracious to him and didn't rebuke him? Is because Gideon had to learn to see what God saw in the mirror. And so it wasn't that he lacked faith. Is that he needed reflection transformation. He's like, God, I believe you're with me. I do. But I need you to tell me again. Yeah. I need you to tell me again. Like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be faithful. But can you please tell me again? Can you show me one more time? Because I still hear that I'm the weakest person in the weakest clan. I can't not hear that. And I'm wanting to hear what you say about me, but that's been so loud for so long. Would you show me? Would you show me again? Yeah. I think this is actually a key for us to learn how to have reflection transformation. It's that we boldly come to Jesus and say, God, tell me again. Tell me again. Tell me what you think about me. Tell me what you see when you see me. Tell me again about the grace you want to show me. Tell me again about your unconditional love for me. Our need to hear that does not mean we lack faith. It doesn't mean that we're weak. It means that there's a story that's been really loud for a really long time. And the only way you can unhear the story you've been telling yourself is to start to hear the story that God is telling through your life. And I want to end a little bit different today. Can you stand to your feet? I want to take some time and read over you some transformation, reflection, truths. Things that the Bible is filled with about who you are and about who God is and about how he thinks about you. So I want you just to close your eyes. If you might want to open your hands like you're going to receive a gift. Because I believe God wants to start rewriting some stories about what we say to ourselves when we look in the mirror. You're a child of God. You're a friend of Jesus. You've been justified and declared righteous. You belong to him. You're a member of Christ's body. You've been chosen by God. You've been redeemed and forgiven of all your sins. You are complete in Him. You have access to grace through Him. You're free from condemnation. God works for your good. You cannot be separated from His love. You're a citizen of heaven. You've not been given a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. You are born of God, and the evil one cannot touch you. You're a branch of the true vine. You've been chosen to bear fruit. You are God's temple. You're a minister of reconciliation. You're seated with Jesus in the heavenly realms. You're God's workmanship. And you can come to Him with confidence. You can come to Him with confidence. I don't know who needs to hear this morning, but someone needs to know that you can come to Him with confidence. You might feel like Gideon, and you're like, I hear over and over what's broken about me. My shortcomings, my failures, what I wish happened, what I wish I would have done. And you need to know you can come with confidence to Jesus and hear, you're not weak, you're strong. You're not forgotten, you're seen. You're not lost, you're found. You're not dirty, you're clean. So God, that's our desire, is that we would have transformation in our reflection. That we would see how you see. We would see ourselves the way that you see us, through the lens of grace and kindness and mercy. And Lord, we just with confidence say that we can do all things through you, through Jesus, who strengthens us. There's nothing that's impossible with you. But that starts with us believing that you are who you say that you are, and we are who you say that we are. Jesus, we love you. We love you, Jesus. Amen. Let's sing together.